My dad demanded my deployment money. He didn't know I was about to inherit everything. $23,400. My dad's eyes went wide as he stared at my phone screen showing my bank balance. I'd made the mistake of checking it at the kitchen table while he hovered behind me, coffee mug in hand. Jesus Christ, Riley. That's more money than I make in 8 months. His voice had that edge I remembered from childhood, the one that usually preceded him asking for something I didn't want to give. I quickly locked my phone and shoved it into my pocket. It's deployment money, Dad. 14 months in Afghanistan with nothing to spend it on except overpriced energy drinks at the PX. He sat down across from me at the same scratched wooden table where I'd eaten cereal before school for 12 years. The kitchen looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier. The linoleum was peeling near the sink, and I noticed a water stain on the ceiling that hadn't been there when I left. You know, your old man's in a bit of a tight spot right now, he said, attempting what I think was supposed to be a casual tone. That money could really help us out. Us. There was no us. There hadn't been in US since Mom died when I was 16, and he'd started treating me more like a roommate who occasionally reminded him of his responsibilities. Help out how? I asked, though I already knew. Dad had never met a get-rich-quick scheme he didn't like. Last I'd heard, he was trying to flip houses with money he didn't have, convinced he'd stumbled onto some foolproof system he'd found on YouTube. The contractors ran over budget on the Maple Street property. I'm about 15 grand in the hole, and if I don't pay them by Friday, they're walking off the job. I've got buyers lined up, Riley. This could set us up for life. I'd heard variations of this speech since I was 14. There was always a sure thing, always buyers lined up, always one more investment that would change everything. The only thing that ever changed was how much deeper he dug himself. Dad, I need that money for college. GI Bill covers tuition, but I'll need living expenses, books, all that stuff. This is my future we're talking about. His face hardened. Your future. What about my future? You think I can keep living paycheck to paycheck forever? I'm 47 years old, working construction, and my knees are shot. This house deal is my way out. I looked around the kitchen again, really seeing it this time. The dishes piled in the sink weren't just from this morning, some had been there long enough to develop a film. Empty pizza boxes were stacked on the counter next to a stack of overdue bills held down by an empty beer bottle. What happened to the money from the last house? I asked quietly. That's different. The market shifted. Nobody could have predicted. Dad. I stood up. The answer is no. The silence stretched between us like a fault line. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Henderson's dog barking and the distant hum of traffic on Route 9. Normal sounds from a normal Tuesday morning that felt anything but normal. No. His voice was deadly quiet. I fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe me. Something cold settled in my stomach. I don't owe you anything for being a parent. That was your job. He slammed his fist on the table, making the salt shaker jump. Don't you dare talk to me like that in my house. I'd forgotten how quickly he could flip that switch. Your house. The words came out sharper than I intended. Dad, there's a foreclosure notice taped to the front door. I saw it when I walked up. His face went red. That's temporary. Once this Maple Street deal goes through. There is no deal. I couldn't help raising my voice. Just like there was no deal with the duplex on Cherry Street, or the investment opportunity with your buddy Mike's roofing company, or that cryptocurrency thing you lost 3 grand on last year. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. You don't know what you're talking about. You've been playing soldier for over a year while I've been here trying to build something real. Build something real. Dad, you haven't paid the mortgage in 4 months. Mrs. Henderson told me when I was bringing in your mail yesterday. The whole neighborhood knows. That hit home. I watched his shoulders sag slightly before he caught himself. 15,000, Riley. That's all I need. You'll still have 8 grand left for college. And what happens when the 15 isn't enough? When you need another 10 for permits, or 5 for materials, or 20 because the foundation has problems. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen again. This isn't Monopoly money. This is 14 months of sleeping in a concrete bunker, of eating Maries, of watching my friends get shipped home in boxes. His expression shifted, and for a moment I thought he might actually hear me. But then his jaw set in that familiar stubborn line. You're being selfish, he said. I'm your father. Everything I do is for this family. What family? The question hung in the air between us. When's the last time you asked how I was doing over there? When's the last time you sent a care package or even an email that wasn't asking for money? He looked away. I'm not good with that stuff. You know that. But this house deal. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. I'm not giving you my deployment money so you can lose it on another scheme. The silence that followed felt different this time. Heavier. He stared at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. Fine, he said finally. But don't come crawling back to me when you realize how hard the real world is. The army's been babying you, giving you free food and housing. Out here, money talks, and people who don't understand that get left behind. I almost laughed. The army's been babying me. Dad, I spent 14 months dodging IEDs and mortars. I think I can handle college. We'll see about that. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm going to work. Don't touch anything while I'm gone. Don't touch anything. Like I was still 12 years old and might break something valuable. Looking around the kitchen with its peeling linoleum and stained ceiling, I wondered what exactly he thought I might damage that wasn't already falling apart. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. I heard his truck start up and pull out of the driveway with more gas than necessary. I sat back down at the table and pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from Grandma Rose. That was unusual. She typically preferred texting, said it was easier than trying to catch me at a good time with the time zones. I was about to call her back when a text came through. Riley, dear, I need to speak with you today. It's important. Can you drive up to Millbrook? Grandma. Something about the tone felt off. Grandma Rose never asked for anything. The drive to Millbrook usually took 45 minutes, but I made it in 37. Something about Grandma Rose's text had left me unsettled, not just the formal tone, but the fact that she'd asked me to come immediately. In all my 22 years, she'd never been anything but patient, always accommodating my schedule, my plans, my chaos. Her house sat on 3 acres at the end of Birch Lane, a sprawling colonial that had been in our family since 1952. White clapboard siding, black shutters, and a wraparound porch that she kept decorated with seasonal flowers. Even in late October, there were mums and pumpkins arranged in perfect clusters by the front steps. I found her in the sunroom, sitting in her favorite wicker chair with a cup of tea growing cold on the side table. At 73, Grandma Rose had always been the picture of elegant aging, silver hair always perfectly styled, posture straight as a ruler, clothes that looked expensive even when they weren't. But today something was different. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Riley. Her face lit up when she saw me, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you for coming so quickly. I kissed her cheek and settled into the chair across from her. Of course. Is everything okay? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at her garden where the last of the roses were clinging to life despite the morning frost. I've been meaning to have this conversation with you for months, but I kept finding reasons to put it off. Your deployment, then wanting to let you settle back in, but I can't wait anymore. My stomach tightened. Grandma, you're scaring me. I'm sick, sweetheart. The words came out matter of fact, like she was commenting on the weather. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The sunroom suddenly felt too bright, too warm. What? When did you, how long have you known? 6 months. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I didn't want to tell you while you were overseas. You had enough to worry about. 6 months. I'd been sending her cheerful emails about army food and desert sunsets while she was dealing with this alone. Why didn't you tell Dad? Her expression hardened slightly. Because your father would have seen dollar signs, not his mother dying. You know that as well as I do. I couldn't argue with that. Dad's first question would have been about her will, her assets, what this meant for his financial situation. The thought made me sick. What are the doctors saying? 3 to 6 months, if I'm lucky. She said it with the same calm she used to discuss grocery lists. I've made my peace with it, Riley. I've had a good life, a long life. I'm not afraid. I was, though. Terrified. She was the only family I had left who actually felt like family. I've been getting my affairs in order, she continued. Meeting with lawyers, updating documents, that sort of thing. Which brings me to why I needed to see you today. She reached for an envelope on the side table, cream-colored paper, thick and expensive looking. I've made some changes to my will. Significant changes. And I wanted you to hear about them from me, not from some attorney after I'm gone. My hands were shaking slightly as I took the envelope. Grandma, I don't care about any of that right now. You will, she said quietly. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to change your life, and possibly your relationship with your father forever. Through the sunroom windows, I could see a cardinal at the bird feeder, bright red against the gray October sky. Such a normal sight on such an abnormal day. Riley, she said, I'm leaving everything to you. The house, the investments, the life insurance, all of it. Your father gets nothing. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. Everything. My voice came out as barely a whisper. $2.7 million, give or take. She said it like she was telling me the temperature outside. The house is worth about $800,000, then there's the investment portfolio your grandfather left me, the life insurance policy, and some other assets. I felt dizzy. This morning I'd been protecting $23,000 from my father's schemes. Now Grandma was telling me I was about to inherit nearly $3 million. I don't understand. Why would you cut Dad out completely? Her laugh was bitter, unlike any sound I'd ever heard from her. Oh, Riley. Where do I even start? She stood up slowly and walked to the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Do you know your father hasn't visited me once since you deployed? Not once in 14 months. That shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Grandma. He calls, though. Every few weeks. Always needs something. Last month it was $3,000 for some roof repair emergency that couldn't wait. The month before that, it was $5,000 because his truck broke down and he needed it for work. She turned back to face me. Funny thing is, I drove past his house last week. The roof looks fine, and that same truck was sitting in the driveway. My stomach dropped. You gave him money. I gave him money for years, sweetheart. Tens of thousands of dollars. I told myself I was helping him get back on his feet after your mother died, that he just needed time to figure things out. Her voice grew harder. But it's been 6 years, Riley. 6 years of bailouts and loans that never get repaid and emergencies that always seem to coincide with his latest investment scheme. I thought about this morning, about him demanding my deployment money with the same desperate edge I've been hearing my whole life. The house on Maple Street. There is no house on Maple Street. I called every contractor in town yesterday after you texted me about his latest request for money. Nobody's working on a flip project for your father. The room felt like it was tilting. But he seemed so sure, so specific about the details. Your father has always been good at making lies sound convincing. It's how he convinced himself he was protecting you all these years when really he was just protecting his access to my checkbook. I sank back into the wicker chair, my head spinning. So when he asked for $15,000 this morning, he was planning to come to me if you said no. Just like always. She sat back down and fixed me with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. But I'm dying, Riley, and I finally see clearly what I should have seen years ago. Your father doesn't love me or you, he loves what we can do for him financially. The cardinal was still at the feeder, joined now by its mate. They took turns, one eating while the other kept watch. I wondered what it would be like to have that kind of partnership, that kind of trust. He's going to hate me, I said quietly. He's going to hate himself, she corrected. But he'll blame you, yes. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the foreclosure notice on his front door, about his truck that apparently worked fine despite the story he told Grandma about needing $5,000 for repairs. About 14 months of emails from me and silence from him except when he needed something. He already blames me for existing, I said. At least this way I can afford to move out. Grandma Rose smiled, and this time it did reach her eyes. There's my pragmatic grandchild. You get that from your grandfather, you know. He always said the best revenge against someone who underestimates you is to prove them wrong while they're watching. The envelope in my hands felt heavier than it should have. Inside were legal documents I couldn't fully comprehend, pages of whereas clauses and beneficiary designations that spelled out my father's complete disinheritance in cold, precise language. When did you change it? I asked, still staring at the papers. 2 weeks ago. Right after the last phone call from your father. Grandma Rose settled back into her chair with a wince that she tried to hide. He called asking for money to fix the furnace before winter. Said you were coming home soon and he wanted the house to be comfortable for you. Something twisted in my chest. That's actually thoughtful. Her expression was grim. I believed him too. Transferred $2,000 that same day. Then Mrs. Patterson from down your street called me yesterday. We've been friends for 40 years, you know. She mentioned how nice it was that your father had bought that new motorcycle. The words hit me like a slap. Motorcycle? A Harley Davidson, according to Margaret. Paid cash for it at Sullivan's Motors last Friday. Grandma's voice was steady, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. Cost him exactly $2,000. I closed my eyes, remembering the sound of his truck peeling out of the driveway this morning. He must have taken the bike to work instead. Jesus, Grandma. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for him, Riley. I've been doing that for too long. She picked up her teacup with hands that shook slightly. Do you want to know what really made me call the lawyers? I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded anyway. He asked about my health during that call. Not in the way a son should ask. He wanted to know if I'd been to any doctors lately, if there was anything he should know about regarding my future plans. Her laugh was hollow. He was fishing, sweetheart. Trying to figure out if I was sick, if he needed to start positioning himself as the devoted son. The cardinal pair had finished at the feeder and flown away, leaving just the empty October afternoon pressing against the sunroom windows. I wished I could follow them. The irony is perfect, isn't it? Grandma continued. If he'd actually been a decent father, a decent son, he would have inherited enough money to solve every financial problem he's ever had. Instead, his greed cost him everything. I thought about the math. Nearly $3 million. Dad's share of the Maple Street house scheme was $15,000. He'd thrown away a fortune for the sake of a lie that wouldn't have netted him enough to buy a decent used car. There's something else you need to know, Grandma said quietly. I've spoken with my attorney about setting up a trust. You'll have access to some funds immediately, enough for college, living expenses, to get yourself established. But the bulk of the inheritance won't be available until you're 25. Why? Because you're young, and money changes people. I've watched it happen to your father his entire adult life. I want you to have time to figure out who you are before you have to figure out who you are with millions of dollars. That made sense, even though the practical part of my mind was already calculating what some funds immediately might mean. Enough to get away from Dad's house. Enough to not worry about textbook costs or whether I could afford groceries. When are you going to tell him? I asked. Grandma Rose was quiet for a long moment, staring out at her garden where the last roses were finally surrendering to the frost. I'm not, she said finally. You are. The words hit me like ice water. What? Grandma, I can't. You can and you will. Her voice carried a steel I'd only heard a few times in my life, usually when she was telling off rude store clerks or putting Dad in his place during family dinners. This is his consequence to face, Riley. Not mine. I stared at the legal documents in my lap, the pages suddenly feeling like they weighed 1,000 pounds. But you're his mother. Don't you think the news should come from his mother who he lies to? Who he steals from? She set her teacup down with a sharp clink. No, sweetheart. I've been enabling his behavior for years by cushioning every fall, softening every consequence. It stops now. My phone buzzed with a text message. Dad, talk to Morrison about the Maple Street timeline. Everything's still on track. Need that $15K by Thursday latest. I showed Grandma the screen. She read it and shook her head slowly. Morrison, she said. As in Tom Morrison who owns Morrison Construction. I guess. Why? Because Tom Morrison died 3 years ago. Heart attack at his daughter's wedding. Grandma's expression was grim. His company closed 6 months later. I know because I sent flowers to the funeral, and Helen Morrison has been working at the bank ever since. The lie was so specific, so unnecessary. He could have made up any name, but instead he chose someone Grandma would know was dead. Either he was getting sloppy or he just didn't care anymore. There's something else, Grandma continued, reaching for another envelope on the side table. This one was manila, thick with what looked like photographs. I hired a private investigator last month. You did what? I needed to know the truth about where my money was actually going. Meet Jennifer Walsh, former police detective turned private investigator. She handed me the envelope. Her report makes for interesting reading. Inside were photos and documents that painted a picture of Dad's life I'd never seen. Photos of him at a casino in Connecticut, dated just 2 weeks ago. Credit reports showing gambling debts to multiple establishments. Bank records revealing cash advances that coincided exactly with Grandma's loans. $23,000 in casino markers in the past 6 months, Grandma said quietly. All of it paid off with money he claimed was for emergency repairs and medical bills. I found a photo of Dad at a poker table, leaning back in his chair with a beer in his hand and chips stacked in front of him. He looked relaxed, happy even. Happier than I'd seen him at home in years. The Maple Street house story wasn't his first fiction, Grandma continued. There was also a fabricated medical emergency in June, claimed he needed $4,000 for surgery to remove kidney stones. Spent it at Foxwoods over a weekend. My hands were shaking as I flipped through more photos. Dad at racetracks, at different casinos, always with cash he shouldn't have had. The dates corresponded with my deployment. While I was dodging mortar rounds in Kandahar, he was playing blackjack with Grandma's money. Why didn't you confront him? I asked. Because I was waiting for you to come home. This affects you too, Riley. You needed to see who your father really is before you make any decisions about your own life. I thought about this morning, about how desperate he'd seemed when he demanded my deployment money. How angry he'd gotten when I refused. Had that been withdrawal from his gambling, or just frustration that his backup plan wasn't cooperating? The inheritance, I said slowly. When will he find out? That depends on when you tell him. The will reading isn't scheduled until after the funeral, but there's nothing stopping you from sharing the news earlier. She studied my face carefully. Though I should warn you, Jennifer's report suggests your father owes some significant money to some unpleasant people. When he realizes the inheritance isn't coming. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I could imagine Dad's reaction when he discovered that his safety net had not only disappeared, but had been handed to the son who refused to bail him out that morning. How much does he owe? I asked. Grandma pulled out one more document, a summary sheet in Jennifer's neat handwriting. $47,000, spread across 6 different establishments. Some of it official debt, some of it less official. The number hit me like a physical blow. Dad hadn't just been gambling with Grandma's money, he'd been losing far more than she'd ever given him. The foreclosure notice, I said, understanding flooding in. It's not about failed house flips. No, Grandma agreed. It's about a man who mortgaged his house to feed a gambling addiction, then ran out of credit everywhere else. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Dad, also, might need to borrow your car tomorrow. Truck's making that noise again. I almost laughed at the absurdity. He was planning to take my car to work while lying about needing $15,000 for a non-existent construction project to pay for gambling debts that exceeded his annual salary. When do you want me to tell him? I asked. Grandma Rose smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. I think tonight would be perfect timing. Right after he asks you for the money again. When I got back to Dad's house that evening, I found him in the living room with paperwork spread across the coffee table. For a split second, I thought maybe Grandma Rose had been wrong, maybe there really was a Maple Street project and legitimate contractors named Morrison. Then I saw what he was actually looking at. Lottery tickets. Dozens of them, organized in neat rows like he was conducting some kind of scientific experiment. Scratch-offs, Powerball tickets, megabucks, there had to be $200 worth scattered across the table. Hey, he said without looking up, running a quarter across a silver coating. How was Grandma's? Fine. I stayed in the doorway, watching him work through the tickets with methodical precision. She says hi. He finished one ticket, crumpled it up, and tossed it toward an overflowing wastebasket. Listen, I talked to the guys about timeline again. We really need that 15 grand by tomorrow if we want to keep this deal alive. I pulled out my phone and showed him the text messages he'd sent earlier. You said Thursday before. He glanced up, irritated. Plans change. Construction's like that. You have to be flexible. Right. I sat down across from him, pushing aside a stack of losing tickets. Tell me about Morrison again. What's his first name? What does that matter? Dad's voice carried a sharp edge as he focused intently on scratching another ticket. Tom Morrison, he's got a crew of 8 guys, been doing this for 20 years. My chest tightened. Even now, even caught in a lie, he was doubling down. 20 years is impressive. He must have done a lot of projects around here. Yeah, tons. Real professional operation. Dad finished the ticket, another loser, and reached for the next one. That's why I'm willing to pay premium rates. Quality costs money. I watched him work through 3 more tickets, each one joining the pile of failures in the wastebasket. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the scraping of his quarter against the silver coating and the distant sound of Mrs. Henderson's television through the thin walls. Dad, I said quietly, Tom Morrison died 3 years ago. His hand froze halfway through scratching a ticket. For about 10 seconds, the only sound was the heating system kicking on somewhere in the basement. What did you say? Tom Morrison. Heart attack at his daughter's wedding in 2021. Grandma went to the funeral. I kept my voice steady, matter of fact. His company closed 6 months later. Dad set down the quarter and looked at me directly for the first time since I'd gotten home. You don't know what you're talking about. Different Morrison. How many Tom Morrisons run construction companies in a town of 12,000 people? He stood up abruptly, scattering lottery tickets onto the floor. You know what your problem is, Riley. You question everything instead of just trusting family. I'm trying to build something here, and all you want to do is poke holes. I'm trying to understand why you need my deployment money for a project with a dead contractor. It's not the same guy. His voice rose to just below shouting. Jesus Christ, you spend one afternoon with your grandmother and suddenly you're some kind of detective. I bent down and picked up one of the fallen lottery tickets. A $20 scratch-off called Millionaire's Club. Still unscratched. Dad, how much did you spend on these today? That's none of your business. How much? He ran both hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from childhood whenever he was cornered. 200. Maybe 250. It's an investment, Riley. You study the patterns, figure out which stores have been selling winners. It's gambling. The words came out flat, without emotion. And you're using money you told Grandma was for fixing the furnace. His face went pale. How do you? She had no right to. We had an agreement about that loan. What agreement? That she'd keep giving you money while you lied about where it went. Dad's jaw worked silently for a moment, and I could see him calculating how much I knew, how much trouble he was in. Finally, he sat back down and put his head in his hands. It's not what you think, he said quietly. Then tell me what it is. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. I'm close, Riley. Closer than I've ever been to hitting something big. I've got a system, I've been tracking the patterns for months. Just need enough capital to make it work. The lottery tickets scattered around our feet suddenly looked like the most pathetic thing in the world. A system. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this broken man with the father who used to seem so confident, so sure of himself. Dad, do you hear yourself right now? He scrambled to gather the lottery tickets, his hands shaking slightly. You don't understand. I've been tracking which gas stations sell the most winners, what times of day, which games have the best odds. It's not random, there are patterns. How much have you won using this system? The question hung in the air. He stopped collecting tickets and sat back on his heels, surrounded by hundreds of dollars worth of losing scratch-offs. It takes time to see returns on any investment, he said finally. How much, Dad? Couple hundred here and there. Nothing major yet, but... How much have you lost? Silence. Through the thin walls, I could hear Mr. Patterson's dog barking and the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn despite the October cold. Normal sounds from normal lives that weren't falling apart in real time. The house, I said, understanding flooding over me. You didn't lose it because of bad investments in real estate. You lost it gambling. His shoulders sagged. It started small. Just $20 here and there, something to do after work. But then I won $600 on a scratch-off last Christmas, and I thought. He trailed off, staring at the tickets scattered around his feet. You thought you'd figured it out. I had figured it out. That's the thing, I was up almost $3,000 by February. But then I hit a cold streak, and I needed more capital to weather it. That's when I started asking your grandmother for help. My stomach churned. You've been gambling away Grandma's money for 8 months. Borrowing, he corrected quickly. It's all going to be paid back with interest once I hit the big one. She'll understand when she sees the returns. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos Jennifer Walsh had taken. Dad at the casino in Connecticut, chips stacked in front of him, looking relaxed and happy. What about Foxwoods? Is that part of your lottery system too? His face went white. Where did you get that? Does it matter? The point is, you've been lying to everyone. To Grandma, to me, probably to yourself most of all. He lunged forward and grabbed my wrist, his grip tight enough to hurt. You can't tell her about this, Riley. She wouldn't understand. Old people, they don't get investment strategies that involve any risk. Investment strategies. I pulled my hand free. Dad, you owe $47,000 to people who aren't known for their patience with overdue accounts. The blood drained from his face completely. How could you possibly know that? Because Grandma hired someone to find out where her money was really going. I showed him another photo, him at a racetrack, studying a racing form with the intense concentration he'd never applied to any legitimate job. Jennifer Walsh, former police detective. Her report is very thorough. Dad collapsed back into his chair like someone had cut his strings. Oh God. Oh God, she knows everything. Everything, I confirmed. The fake medical bills, the non-existent roof repairs, the motorcycle you bought with furnace money. All of it. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the lottery tickets scattered across the coffee table like the remnants of a demolished life. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. How much trouble am I in? I thought about the legal documents in Grandma Rose's envelope, about the will that had been changed 2 weeks ago, about the inheritance he was expecting that would never come. More than you know, I said quietly. But there's something else we need to talk about. Dad's hands were trembling as he reached for his cigarettes, a habit he'd supposedly quit 2 years ago. Another lie, apparently. The lighter clicked 3 times before he got it to catch. What else? He asked, smoke curling between us. What else could there possibly be? I pulled out the envelope Grandma Rose had given me, the cream-colored paper that contained the legal documents outlining his complete disinheritance. But before I could say anything, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but Dad's face went ashen when he saw it. I have to take this, he said, but made no move to answer. The phone kept ringing. On the 4th ring, Dad finally picked up, his voice artificially casual. Hey there. No, everything's on schedule. Thursday, just like we discussed. I watched his face cycle through expressions, forced confidence, then worry, then barely controlled panic. I understand the terms, Vincent. 24 hours, I get it. His voice cracked slightly on the name. The money's already lined up, just waiting for the transfer to clear. Vincent. I recognized that name from Jennifer Walsh's report, Vincent Kowalski, associated with the underground poker games Dad had been frequenting. The kind of man who charged interest by the week, not the year. No, that won't be necessary, Dad continued, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool house. Like I said, everything's handled. Thursday morning, latest. The call ended, and Dad set his phone down with hands that were visibly shaking now. Let me guess, I said. Vincent's getting impatient about his $47,000. 32, Dad corrected automatically, then caught himself. I mean, how do you know about Vincent? The private investigator was very thorough. She has photos of you at his games going back 6 months. I leaned forward. Dad, these aren't the kind of people who accept payment plans. He took a long drag from his cigarette, buying time. It's handled. After tomorrow, when you give me the 15 grand, I can pay Vincent enough to buy myself some breathing room. Then when the inheritance comes through. What inheritance? The question stopped him mid-sentence. He looked at me like I'd asked what color the sky was. Your grandmother's inheritance. When she, when her time comes. He couldn't quite bring himself to say the words. The house alone is worth 800 grand, plus whatever else she's got saved up. Split between us, that's enough to pay off Vincent and set us both up for life. My stomach dropped. He'd been planning this, counting on Grandma Rose's death as his financial salvation. Dad, she's not even dead yet and you're already spending her money. That's not what I meant, he said quickly. I'm just being practical. Planning ahead. She'd want us to be prepared. I thought about Grandma Rose in her sunroom, calmly explaining why she'd cut him out completely. If she could hear this conversation, she'd know her decision was right. There's not going to be any inheritance, I said quietly. Dad froze with a cigarette halfway to his mouth. What did you say? Grandma changed her will 2 weeks ago. You're not getting anything. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background noise, the heating system, Mrs. Henderson's TV, the distant traffic, seemed to fade away. That's not possible, he said finally. I'm her only son. Her only child. I corrected. You were her only child. Now you're just the son who lies to her and steals her money to feed a gambling addiction. The cigarette fell from his fingers onto the pile of lottery tickets. He didn't seem to notice. She can't do that, he whispered. She can't just cut me out. I'm family. She can, and she did. I pulled the legal documents from the envelope and set them on the coffee table, right next to his losing scratch-offs. $2.7 million, Dad. All of it going to me. Dad stared at the legal documents like they were written in a foreign language. His mouth moved silently as he read, his finger tracing the lines that spelled out his complete disinheritance in precise legal terminology. $2.7 million, he whispered, and then louder, $2.7 million. I nodded, watching his face cycle through disbelief, shock, and something that looked almost like grief. She's leaving it all to you. It wasn't a question. His voice had gone completely flat, like he was reading ingredients off a cereal box. Everything. The house, the investments, even the life insurance policy I helped her set up 15 years ago. Dad. I drove her to the insurance office. His laugh came out cracked and bitter. She said she wanted to make sure her family would be taken care of if anything happened to her. I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours while she filled out paperwork, and I felt good about it. Proud that she was being responsible. He set the documents down carefully, like they might explode. Then he picked up the fallen cigarette and took a long drag, his hands steadier now than they'd been during Vincent's phone call. When does she die? He asked. The bluntness of the question hit me like a slap. Jesus, Dad. She's your mother. When does she die? Each word came out measured and cold. Because Vincent's deadline is tomorrow, and if there's any chance the will reading happens soon enough to save my life, I need to know. I stared at him, trying to find any trace of the father who used to read me bedtime stories, who taught me how to ride a bike in the same driveway. 3 to 6 months, if she's lucky. Months. He crushed the cigarette into an overflowing ashtray. Vincent's not going to wait months. Hell, he's not going to wait days. Maybe you should have thought about that before you gambled away a house. His head snapped up, and for a moment I saw a flash of the old anger. Don't you dare lecture me about choices, Riley. You have no idea what it's been like, trying to keep this family afloat while you were off playing soldier. Playing soldier. The words came out louder than I intended. I was dodging IEDs while you were at poker tables, Dad. I was sleeping in bunkers while you were buying motorcycles with Grandma's money. I was trying to make something work. Trying to build a future for both of us. By lying to everyone who cared about you. He stood up so fast the coffee table shook, sending lottery tickets sliding to the floor. You want to know about lying? Let's talk about your grandmother, the saint. Did she tell you she called Vincent last week? My blood went cold. What? Called him directly. Asked about my business relationship with him. Dad started pacing, his voice getting faster and more manic. Told him she was concerned about my welfare. Do you know what Vincent said to her, Riley? He said she sounded like a very caring mother who might be willing to help her son out of a difficult situation. Oh God. I could picture the conversation, Grandma Rose, trying to understand the extent of Dad's problems, accidentally painting herself as a potential source of payment. He knows about her now, Dad continued. Knows she has money, knows she cares about me. When I can't pay tomorrow, where do you think he's going to go for collection? The room felt like it was spinning. Grandma doesn't know any of this. Of course she doesn't. You think I wanted her involved? But now she is, thanks to her private investigator and her need to control everyone else's life. Dad's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and his face went gray. What? I demanded. Vincent. He's driving up from Hartford tonight. Wants to meet tomorrow morning to discuss the situation in person. Dad showed me the screen. That's not collector talk, Riley. That's threat talk. I grabbed the phone and read the full message. Tommy, looking forward to our breakfast meeting at Millie's Diner, 8 a.m. sharp. Bring your checkbook. Or we'll have to get creative about payment arrangements. P.S. Give my regards to your mother, Rose. The casual mention of Grandma's name made my skin crawl. He can't touch her, I said, but even as I spoke the words, I wasn't sure they were true. Can't he? She's a 73-year-old woman living alone on 3 acres outside town. Cancer's already doing half his work for him. Dad slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 47 years. I never wanted this to happen, Riley. It was supposed to stay separate, contained. Just me cleaning up my own mess. With my deployment money. With anything I could get my hands on. He met my eyes directly. Yeah, with your money. With hers. With whatever it took to make this go away before anyone got hurt. My phone rang. Grandma Rose. I stared at Grandma's name on my phone screen, Vincent's threat echoing in my mind. Dad was watching me with desperate eyes, probably hoping I wouldn't answer, wouldn't drag her deeper into this mess. I answered on the third ring. Riley, dear, Grandma's voice sounded tired, more fragile than it had this afternoon. I hope I'm not calling too late, but something strange happened, and I wanted to tell you about it. My stomach dropped. What kind of strange? A man called about an hour ago. Said his name was Vincent, claimed to be a business associate of your father's. He was asking about my health, whether I'd been feeling well lately. Her voice carried that sharp edge I'd heard earlier when she talked about Dad's lies. It struck me as an odd conversation for a business associate to be having. Dad was making frantic cutting motions across his throat, but I couldn't hang up on her now. What exactly did he say, Grandma? He mentioned that your father had spoken about me often, said I sounded like a caring mother who would want to help her son through difficult times. Then he asked if I was planning to be home tomorrow morning. The diner meeting at 8 a.m. suddenly took on a different meaning. Vincent wasn't just planning to collect from Dad, he was mapping out his backup options. Grandma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't answer your door tomorrow morning for anyone you don't know. Actually, don't answer it for anyone at all. Riley, what's going on? You're scaring me. I looked at Dad, who had his head in his hands. The lottery tickets scattered around his feet seemed to mock the gravity of what his gambling had unleashed. Dad owes money to some dangerous people, and they know about you now. I think you should come stay at a hotel tomorrow, maybe drive to your sister Janet's in Springfield. Dangerous people? Her voice went sharp. Riley, how dangerous are we talking about? Dad's phone buzzed again. Another text from Vincent. Tommy, been thinking about our conversation. Your mother sounds lovely. Bet she makes great apple pie. See you both tomorrow. The casual menace in those words made my hands shake. Dangerous enough that they're making threats about visiting you, I said. Grandma, please. Just pack a bag tonight and drive to Janet's. Don't tell anyone where you're going except me. There was silence on the other end, and I could practically hear her mind working through the implications. This is about the gambling, isn't it? She said finally. The private investigator mentioned your father had been associating with some questionable characters, but I didn't think. It's worse than you know. He owes $32,000 to people who don't accept excuses. Dad's head shot up. 47, he said quietly. I lied about the amount. It's 47,000. I closed my eyes. Even now, even with everything falling apart, he'd been minimizing the scope of the disaster. 47,000, I repeated into the phone. Grandma Rose was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a steel resolve that reminded me why she'd survived the depression and raised 6 children on a factory worker's salary. I see. And this Vincent person thinks I might be willing to pay my son's gambling debts to protect myself. That's exactly what he thinks. Well, she said, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Then Vincent is about to learn something about this family that your father never did. We don't negotiate with bullies, and we sure as hell don't reward bad behavior. Dad was staring at me with growing panic. What's she saying? Riley, you have to convince her to pay him. Just this once, just to buy us time to figure something else out. I covered the phone's microphone. Are you insane? You want to put a dying woman in debt to loan sharks? I want to keep her alive. His voice cracked. You don't know Vincent like I do. This isn't about money anymore, it's about respect. If he can't collect from me, he'll make an example out of her. The worst part was, he might be right. Grandma, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, there's something else you need to know about the inheritance. Dad's eyes went wide with panic. He started shaking his head frantically, but I couldn't stop now. Vincent knows you have money. He's not just coming to collect from Dad, he's coming to collect from the family. If he thinks you're going to inherit everything when you die, he might decide to accelerate the timeline. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Riley, Grandma's voice came back cold as winter. Are you telling me this man might try to hurt me to get his hands on money that doesn't even belong to your father? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Dad lunged for the phone, but I stepped away from him. Give me that, he hissed. Let me talk to her. I can fix this. You've done enough fixing, I snapped, then spoke back into the phone. Grandma, there's more. Vincent doesn't know about the will change. He thinks Dad is going to inherit your estate. Ah. Her voice carried a note of dark satisfaction. So he's planning to collect from a fortune that will never exist. Which makes him more dangerous, not less. When he realizes there's no payout coming. He'll be very angry at your father, Grandma finished. Good. Good. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Grandma, this isn't a game. These people don't just break kneecaps anymore. They disappear problems. Dad had gone completely pale. What's she saying? Riley, what's she saying? I looked at him, really looked at him. The father who taught me to throw a baseball was gone. In his place was a desperate stranger who'd gambled away his own house and put his dying mother in the crosshairs of criminals. The worst part was realizing this transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been gradual, so slow I'd missed it even living under the same roof. She's saying she's not going to bail you out, I told him. Not this time. Dad grabbed my arm again, his grip desperate. Riley, you have to understand. If I don't pay Vincent tomorrow, he's not just going to hurt me. He's going to hurt everyone I care about. That includes you. The words hit me like cold water. In all my calculations about Dad's gambling debts and Grandma's inheritance, I'd somehow forgotten that Vincent's threats might extend to me too. What do you mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. He knows you just got back from deployment. He knows about your savings. Dad's voice dropped to a whisper. He asked about you specifically during that phone call. Said it was touching how the whole family was so close-knit. My blood turned to ice. He knows about my deployment money. $23,400, Dad recited. He mentioned the exact amount, Riley. Down to the penny. I stared at him, understanding flooding over me like nausea. You told him. You actually told a loan shark about my military savings. I was desperate. He was talking about breaking my hands, and I panicked. I told him I had family who might be able to help, and he kept pushing for details. Through the phone, I could hear Grandma Rose's sharp intake of breath. She'd been listening to every word. Riley, her voice came through the speaker, steady as granite, pack a bag. Right now. You're coming to stay with me tonight. Grandma, if Vincent's planning to visit you. Then he'll find both of us waiting, she said. And he'll discover that the Donovan family has been dealing with bullies a lot longer than he's been alive. I was halfway through shoving clothes into a duffel bag when Dad appeared in my bedroom doorway, car keys jingling in his shaking hand. "I'm driving you," he said. "It's not safe for you to go alone." I stopped packing and stared at him. "You're worried about my safety. You're the one who told Vincent where to find me. That was a mistake, okay?" I was panicked, and I said things I shouldn't have said. He stepped into the room, and I could smell the desperation on him, stale cigarettes and fierce sweat. "But I can fix this, Riley. I just need you and Mom to trust me one more time." "Trust you?" I zipped the bag shut with more force than necessary. "Dad, you've been lying for months. About the house, about the money, about everything. Why would we trust you now?" "Because I'm still your father, goddammit." His voice cracked. "Because despite everything I've screwed up, I still love you and I still want to protect you." For a moment, standing there in my childhood bedroom with its faded baseball posters and participation trophies, I almost believed him. This was the same man who'd checked under my bed for monsters when I was 6, who taught me how to change a tire when I turned 16. Then my phone buzzed with another text. "Unknown number, Riley, right? Your dad says you're real responsible with money. Smart kid like you probably understands how important it is to pay debts on time. See you tomorrow. V." My hands were shaking as I showed Dad the screen. "He has my number now too." Dad's face crumpled. "Jesus, Riley. I'm so sorry. I never wanted." "You never wanted what?" "Consequences." I shouldered my duffel bag and pushed past him toward the door. "You've been gambling with other people's money for months, Dad. What did you think was going to happen?" He followed me down the hallway, his footsteps heavy on the creaking floorboards. "I thought I could win it back. I had a system, I was tracking patterns. You had an addiction." I stopped at the front door and turned to face him. "And now Grandma Rose and I are paying for it." The foreclosure notice was still taped to the outside of the door, its bright yellow paper a cheerful reminder that Dad's lies had been unraveling long before Vincent entered the picture. I thought about all the nights I'd spent in Afghanistan, worried about mortars and IEDs, while Dad had been systematically destroying everything we had left. "Let me drive you," he said again, softer this time. "Please. It's the least I can do." I looked at his truck in the driveway, the same truck he'd claimed needed $5,000 in repairs while he was buying a motorcycle with Grandma's money. Everything about him felt like a lie now. "No," I said. "I'll take my car. You need to figure out what you're going to tell Vincent tomorrow morning when you show up at Millie's diner with empty pockets." Dad grabbed the doorframe like he needed it for support. "What if I told him the truth? About the inheritance, about Mom cutting me out? Maybe if he understands there's no money coming. Then he'll know you wasted his time and lied about your ability to pay." I pulled out my car keys. "Dad, these aren't reasonable people. They don't accept my bad as payment." As I walked toward my car, Dad called after me, "Riley. The 15,000. Your deployment money. If I could just give Vincent something tomorrow, enough to show good faith." I stopped with my hand on the car door handle. Even now, even with Vincent threatening both me and Grandma Rose, Dad was still trying to get his hands on my savings. "No," I said without turning around. "Find another way." I heard him say something else as I started the engine, but I was already backing out of the driveway, leaving him standing alone under the porch light with his foreclosure notice and his losing lottery tickets and the crushing weight of 47,000 reasons why his own mother had decided he wasn't worth saving. The drive to Grandma's house took 23 minutes through empty October roads, but it felt like hours. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror could have been Vincent or one of his associates. Every shadowy driveway could have been hiding someone waiting to follow me. I kept thinking about Dad's face when he'd asked for my deployment money one last time. Even with everything falling apart, even with Vincent's threats hanging over all of us, he'd still see my $23,000 as his solution. Part of me wondered if this was who he'd always been, and I'd just been too young to see it clearly. Grandma Rose was waiting on her front porch when I pulled up, despite the 40-degree temperature. She had 2 suitcases beside her and was wearing the heavy wool coat she usually reserved for church. "Change of plans," she said before I'd even gotten out of the car. "We're not staying here tonight." "What? Where are we going?" "Janet's expecting us in Springfield." I called her after we hung up. Grandma Rose lifted one of the suitcases, and I could see the effort it took her. The cancer was taking more of a toll than she wanted to admit. She's got that guest house behind her main property. Private, secure, and far enough from here that Vincent will waste tomorrow morning looking for us. I grabbed both suitcases and helped her into my passenger seat. "You don't want to face him?" "Oh, I want to face him eventually," she said, settling into the seat with a grimace of pain. "But on my terms, not his. Let him show up at an empty house tomorrow. Let him realize that this family doesn't dance to his tune." As we drove south toward Springfield, Grandma Rose filled me in on her conversation with her sister. Janet had been married to a state police officer for 30 years before he died, and she still had connections in law enforcement. More importantly, she had security cameras and a gun safe that hadn't been touched since her husband passed. "Vincent thinks he's dealing with helpless victims," Grandma said, staring out at the dark countryside rolling past. "Your father spent so much time playing the victim that everyone around him looks weak by association. Vincent's about to learn otherwise." My phone rang around 11 p.m., just as we were pulling into Janet's driveway. "Dad's number." "Don't answer it," Grandma said immediately. "What if Vincent's already at the house? What if something's happened to Dad?" She considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Speakerphone. Let me hear what he has to say." I answered on the 4th ring. "Dad?" "Riley, thank God." His voice was slurred, drunk or exhausted, maybe both. "Where are you?" "I went by Mom's house and it's completely dark. Her car's gone." "We're somewhere safe," I said carefully. "Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay. Vincent called again an hour ago. The meeting tomorrow isn't just about collection anymore, he wants to discuss family payment options." Dad's voice cracked. "Riley, I think he's planning to hurt you and Mom to get to me." Beside me, Grandma Rose's expression hardened. She gestured for me to keep him talking. What exactly did Vincent say? He said families should stick together, especially during difficult financial times. He mentioned that military kids are usually disciplined, good at following instructions. And he asked if Mom had updated her will recently. My blood ran cold. Vincent was fishing, trying to understand the family dynamics and who had access to money. If he thought Grandma Rose was leaving everything to Dad. There's something else, Dad continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. I think someone's been watching the house. I keep seeing the same car parked at the end of Maple Street, and when I went to check it out, it drove away. Grandma Rose took the phone from me. David, she said, using Dad's full name in a tone that had terrified me as a child. Listen very carefully. You created this mess, and now you're going to help us fix it. Mom. Dad sounded like he was crying. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Sorry doesn't pay Vincent's debts, she replied coldly. But honesty might save all our lives. It's time you told us exactly how much trouble we're really in. Dad's confession took 47 minutes over speakerphone, sitting in Janet's guest house kitchen while she made coffee none of us would drink. The real numbers were staggering, $63,000 in total debt spread across 8 different creditors, 3 of whom weren't legally licensed to lend money. He'd been lying about the amounts, the timeline, even the names of people he owed. Vincent's the biggest creditor at $32,000, Dad said, his voice hoarse from crying. But he's also the collection agent for 2 of the others. If I can't pay him tomorrow, he takes over the entire debt portfolio. Grandma Rose had been taking notes in her precise handwriting, adding up figures that painted a picture of complete financial collapse. $96,000 total when you include the collection fees and interest penalties. Jesus, I breathed. Dad, that's more than you make in 2 years. I know, okay. But I thought, the Powerball jackpot hit $400 million last month. I had the system down, I just needed enough capital to buy the right combination of tickets across multiple states. Stop. Grandma Rose's voice cut through his rambling like a knife. David, I need you to listen very carefully. At 8 a.m. tomorrow, you're going to meet Vincent at Millie's diner exactly as planned. Mom, no. He'll kill me when I show up empty-handed. You're not showing up empty-handed. She looked at me across the table, and I saw something calculating in her eyes. You're bringing him a cashier's check for $32,000. My stomach dropped. Grandma, you can't seriously be thinking about paying him. She held up one finger, still writing numbers. I'm thinking about ending this threat to my family using the only leverage we have left. She looked directly at me. Riley, what's the one thing Vincent doesn't know about our situation? I thought for a moment, then understanding hit me like lightning. The will. He thinks Dad's going to inherit everything. Exactly. Vincent's treating your father like a good long-term investment, someone whose debts will be worth collecting because of his future inheritance prospects. Grandma Rose smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. Tomorrow morning, Vincent's going to learn that his investment just became worthless. Through the phone, Dad was frantically trying to follow our conversation. What are you talking about? Mom, what will? The will that leaves your son everything and gives you nothing, she said matter-of-factly. The will that makes you a bad dad, David. Vincent's going to take his $32,000 and walk away, because continuing to collect from you would be throwing good money after bad. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Grandma Rose would pay Vincent just enough to demonstrate that she could cover Dad's debts if she chose to. Then she'd explain that Dad was completely cut out of her inheritance, making him a liability rather than an asset. Vincent was a businessman first. Once he understood there was no long-term money to be made from terrorizing our family, he'd cut his losses. But what about the other creditors? Dad asked. The $63,000 I still owe. That's your problem to solve, Grandma Rose said coldly. You created this mess without involving us. You can clean it up the same way. By 7:30 the next morning, we were parked across the street from Millie's diner in Grandma Rose's Buick, watching Vincent arrive in a black Escalade with Connecticut plates. He was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'8", wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in rural New Hampshire. But when Dad's truck pulled into the parking lot 12 minutes later, I could see my father's hands shaking on the steering wheel from 50 yards away. Grandma Rose checked her purse one more time, making sure the cashier's check was easily accessible. Remember, she told me, we wait exactly 15 minutes. Long enough for your father to explain his situation, short enough that Vincent doesn't lose his temper. At 7:57 a.m., we walked into Millie's diner. Vincent was sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall, Dad across from him looking like he was about to vomit. The conversation stopped immediately when they saw us approaching. Vincent Kowalski, Grandma Rose said, extending her hand like she was greeting a church deacon. I'm Rose Donovan. I believe we spoke on the phone. Vincent stood up automatically, apparently his mother had taught him manners, and shook her hand. Mrs. Donovan. Nice to finally meet you in person. I wish I could say the same, she replied pleasantly, sliding into the booth next to Dad. But I understand you've been threatening my family. Vincent's smile was all teeth and no warmth. I prefer to think of it as explaining consequences. Your son owes me money, Mrs. Donovan. Quite a bit of money. $32,412, Grandma Rose said, pulling the cashier's check from her purse and placing it on the table. Including this week's interest penalties. Vincent's eyes widened slightly when he saw the check. I have to admit, Mrs. Donovan, I wasn't sure your son was being entirely truthful about his family's resources. My son hasn't been entirely truthful about anything in months, she replied. But that ends today. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a copy of her will, flagging the relevant pages with yellow sticky notes. Mr. Kowalski, I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, 3 to 6 months according to my doctors. I assume that's why you've been so patient with David's debt, you expect it to be paid from my estate. Vincent leaned forward, his businessman's instincts engaged. The thought had occurred to me. Then you should read page 12, section 4. She slid the document across the table. My will leaves everything to my grandson Riley here. David inherits nothing. Not the house, not the investments, not even my jewelry. I watched Vincent's face as he read the relevant section, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to calculation. When he looked up, his smile had disappeared completely. This says he's completely disinherited. No inheritance at all. That's correct. David has proven himself irresponsible with money, so I've chosen to skip a generation. Grandma Rose folded her hands calmly on the table. Which means, Mr. Kowalski, that extending credit to my son beyond what I'm paying today would be very poor business indeed. Vincent stared at the will for another long moment, then at Dad, who was slumped in the booth like a deflated balloon. The calculation behind Vincent's eyes was almost visible. A debtor with no future income prospects wasn't worth the effort to collect from. Well, Vincent said finally, folding the check and sliding it into his jacket pocket. This certainly changes the dynamic of our relationship, doesn't it, Tommy? Dad just nodded miserably. Consider your account with me settled, Vincent continued, standing up from the booth. But Tommy, don't come looking for credit again. Ever. From me or anyone else I know. He left without another word, taking his expensive suit and his threats with him. Dad looked across the table at us with tears in his eyes. So that's it. I'm really cut out completely. Completely, Grandma Rose confirmed. And the foreclosure on your house will proceed as scheduled. You'll need to find somewhere else to live. But where? I don't have any money, and now I can't even borrow. You have 2 hands and a back that still works, she interrupted. Get a job, David. A real job. Start over and do it honestly this time. As we walked out of Millie's diner, leaving Dad alone in the booth with his coffee and his consequences, I realized that Grandma Rose had given me more than just an inheritance. She'd shown me what it looked like to love someone enough to let them face the results of their choices, even when it hurt. 3 months later, I got the call I'd been dreading. Grandma Rose had died peacefully in her sleep, Janet at her bedside. The funeral was small, family, a few neighbors, some friends from her book club. Dad came, wearing a suit I'd never seen before and carrying flowers he'd paid for with money from his new job at Morrison Landscaping, a different Morrison, one who was very much alive. He looked different. Thinner, older, but somehow more solid than he'd been in years. After the